In the Horn of Africa lies a nation hurtling towards the future at a breathtaking pace, a transformation so rapid it demands our attention. Yet behind the headlines lies a complex reality. Here is a startling fact: in the last 10 years, while Ethiopia has built one of Africa's largest economies, it has also faced internal displacement crises that are among the most severe in the world. How can a nation achieve such monumental economic success while simultaneously grappling with such profound social fractures? This question is not just for Ethiopians. It resonates across the world because what happens here has the power to influence trade, security, and diplomacy for an entire continent. This is the human story behind the headlines, a story of hope, struggle, and the unspoken consequences of a nation's rise. To understand the Ethiopia of today, one must first remember the Ethiopia of yesterday. The final decades of the 20th century were a time of profound suffering. A brutal military junta, the Derg, unleashed a red terror that consumed a generation, while civil war tore at the country's ancient seams. Haunting the world's television screens were images of a devastating famine, a catastrophe that defined Ethiopia in the global imagination. From these ashes of political violence and desperate hunger, a new Ethiopia had to be born. As the new millennium dawned, the ruling EPRDF coalition articulated a bold vision, looking not to the west for its model, but to the east. They envisioned a developmental state where the government would marshal the nation's resources to steer it from subsistence to prosperity in a single generation. The strategy was named Agricultural Development-Led Industrialization. The logic was audacious. The road to a modern economy began not in the factory, but in the field. Agriculture, the livelihood of over 80% of the population, would be the engine of growth. To jumpstart this engine, the state deployed an army of development agents, tens of thousands strong, fanning out across the highlands and lowlands. They brought improved seeds, fertilizers, and new techniques for water and crop management. They worked with farmers on their small plots of land, coaxing greater yields from the soil. The focus was on staples like teff, the tiny grain that forms the basis of injera, the nation's beloved flatbread, aiming to transform a system plagued by drought into a foundation for food security and economic takeoff. Nowhere is this ambition more tangible than in the capital, Addis Ababa. Here, the city's name, New Flower, has taken on a literal meaning as a skyline of glass and steel blossoms from the red earth. The relentless hum of construction has become the city's soundtrack, an anthem of change. Cranes pivot across the sky, assembling luxury hotels, shopping malls, and the gleaming headquarters of the African Union, a symbol of Ethiopia's resurgent continental leadership. Amidst this forest of new buildings, a landmark project redefined the city's rhythm. In 2015, the Addis Ababa light rail began to glide above congested streets. The first modern light rail in sub-Saharan Africa, it stitched together the sprawling metropolis. For millions, it replaced the chaotic dance of packed minibuses with a clean, efficient way to traverse their city, a daily affirmation of progress. Yet these transformations are dwarfed by a single, colossal undertaking in the remote Benishangul Gumuz region. This is the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam, the GERD. Of all the mega-projects, none is more ambitious or symbolic. Its scale is difficult to comprehend, a concrete behemoth stretching over a mile long and rising 155 meters from the floor of the Blue Nile Gorge. The reservoir behind it will hold a staggering volume of water. What makes the GERD truly extraordinary, however, is not just its size, but how it was paid for. Spurning foreign loans that might come with political strings, Ethiopia turned inward in a national crusade. Government workers pledged a month's salary. Business leaders made huge contributions, and across the country, ordinary citizens, from farmers to schoolchildren, lined up to buy dam bonds, investing their modest savings in a shared dream. It was a powerful display of self-reliance, a collective act of nation-building. For Ethiopia, the GERD is the master key to its economic destiny. With a planned capacity of over 5 gigawatts, it will more than double the nation's electricity output, promising to connect the nearly two-thirds of the population still living without reliable power. This vast new energy source is intended to fuel a wave of industrialization, powering factories and attracting foreign investment. Ethiopia dreams of becoming the powerhouse of East Africa, exporting surplus electricity to its neighbors. But this dream of Renaissance is a source of deep anxiety downstream. The dam sits on the Blue Nile, the tributary that provides over 85% of the water flowing into the main Nile River. For Egypt, a desert nation of over 100 million, the Nile is an existential lifeline. Cairo views any disruption to its flow as a direct threat to its water security and survival, citing historical treaties from the colonial era that Ethiopia has never recognized. This has created a geopolitical flashpoint of immense proportions. Years of negotiations with Sudan have failed to produce a binding agreement on how the dam will be filled and operated. For Ethiopia, the dam is a declaration of sovereignty. For Egypt, it is a challenge to its historical rights. And so, the GERD stands today as a potent symbol, a testament to one nation's soaring ambition and a source of profound tension that holds the stability of an entire region in its balance. The Nile. For millennia, this singular river has been the cradle of civilization, its annual floods dictating the rhythm of life, death, and rebirth. Herodotus famously declared that Egypt is the gift of the Nile, a truth that echoes through the ages. Today, that ancient gift feels profoundly threatened. For Egypt, a nation of over 100 million people sustained by its waters, the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam, or GERD, is more than a dispute over resources. It is perceived as an existential challenge to its very survival. For years, diplomatic chambers have echoed with the weight of this impasse. Tense negotiations brokered by the African Union and observed by the world have circled the core of the issue without resolution. On one side, a nation's deep-seated fear for its lifeline. On the other, Ethiopia's unyielding assertion of its sovereign right. As the source of over 85% of the Nile's flow, Ethiopia sees the dam not as a weapon, but as a promise of electricity for 60% of its population living in darkness, a promise of industrial growth, and a symbol of a nation finally harnessing its own natural wealth to chart a new course. Caught in the middle is Sudan, a nation facing a complex calculus of risk and reward. The dam offers the potential for cheap, reliable power, and an end to the devastating seasonal floods that plague its lands, yet it also places the key to its own water security firmly in the hands of its upstream neighbour, a dependency that breeds deep unease. This bold project on the Nile is emblematic of a wider transformation. Ethiopia, a country once synonymous with famine, is now asserting itself as a continental heavyweight. Its rapid economic growth over the past 2 decades, coupled with its status as Africa's second most populous nation, has endowed it with significant political capital. This newfound clout is most visible in Addis Ababa, the nation's sprawling capital. Here, at the headquarters of the African Union, Ethiopia plays a central role in shaping the continent's future, acting as a key mediator in regional conflicts, from South Sudan to Somalia. Its voice is a powerful advocate for Pan-African solutions and economic integration, championing initiatives like the African Continental Free Trade Area. This influence is backed by considerable hard power. The Ethiopian National Defense Force is one of the largest and most experienced in Africa, a legacy of its long and turbulent history. For decades, its soldiers have been mainstays of United Nations and African Union peacekeeping missions, serving in some of the world's most volatile hotspots. This combination of diplomatic leadership, economic ambition, and military capability has made Ethiopia an indispensable and at times controversial player on a shifting African stage. But to understand the most dramatic shift in Ethiopia's recent history, one must look north to its border with Eritrea. Here, for 20 years, a painful silence reigned. The two nations, bound by deep cultural and historical ties, were locked in a bitter stalemate. A brutal border war from 1998 to 2000 had claimed an estimated 100,000 lives, leaving a legacy of mistrust and a border sealed by trenches and animosity. What followed was a generation of no war, no peace, a frozen conflict that severed families, crippled economies, and institutionalized a state of mutual paranoia. The border became an impassable scar on the landscape, a physical manifestation of the political divide. Then, in 2018, the impossible happened. Following the rise of a new, dynamic prime minister in Ethiopia, Abiy Ahmed, the political landscape was seismically altered. In a move that stunned international observers, Abiy announced his unconditional acceptance of a peace agreement that had been dormant for 16 years. The world watched, holding its breath, as he flew to the Eritrean capital, Asmara. The resulting images were extraordinary. Prime Minister Abiy and Eritrean President Isaias Afwerki, two leaders whose nations had been sworn enemies for a generation, met on the tarmac not with a formal handshake, but with a heartfelt embrace. In that single, powerful gesture, 2 decades of hostility seemed to melt away. They declared an end to the state of war, and a new era of hope was born. The dividends of peace were immediate and profoundly human. Telephone lines, dead for 20 years, crackled back to life. Commercial flights resumed, carrying passengers weeping with joy. At the newly opened border crossings, scenes of tearful reunions unfolded, as parents embraced children, and siblings saw each other for the first time since they were young. It was a powerful testament to the shared humanity that had been suppressed for so long, a beacon of hope in one of the world's most troubled regions. Yet the very swiftness of this reconciliation, celebrated as a diplomatic masterstroke, also concealed deep complexities. The peace was not the product of lengthy negotiations or institutional frameworks. It was forged almost entirely on the personal chemistry between two powerful leaders. This top-down approach, while effective in breaking the deadlock, bypassed many of the thorny issues that had fueled the conflict, such as the precise demarcation of the border. More critically, this newfound alliance between Abiy and Isaias fundamentally reordered the Horn of Africa's delicate balance of power. It created a powerful bloc that isolated old adversaries, particularly the Tigray People's Liberation Front, the party that had dominated Ethiopian politics for decades and was a bitter enemy of President Isaias. The euphoria of peace, therefore, was tinged with foreboding. The embrace that promised an end to one conflict was, in fact, setting the stage for another, more intricate and devastating chapter in the region's history. In the grand tapestry of a nation, the threads of progress are often woven with the unseen fibers of sacrifice and tension. For Ethiopia, a country of ancient origins and breathtaking ambition, this truth is etched into its very landscape. For years, the narrative was one of remarkable ascent, a beacon of economic growth in Africa, a nation pulling millions from poverty, its capital, Addis Ababa, transforming into a continental hub of diplomacy and commerce. But like the slow, patient brewing of its famous coffee, other more volatile elements were heating just beneath the surface. A complex mosaic of over 80 ethnic groups, each with a proud history and a distinct identity, was held in a delicate, often fraught balance. Historical grievances rooted in centuries of imperial rule and decades of political dominance by one group or another had not vanished. They had merely been submerged, waiting for the pressure to build. The arrival of Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed in 2018 felt like a new dawn. He spoke of Medemer, a philosophy of synergy and coming together, releasing political prisoners and promising a democratic future. Hope was palpable. Yet this very unraveling of the old, tightly controlled political order also loosened the lid on these long-simmering tensions. The powerful Tigray People's Liberation Front, or TPLF, which had dominated Ethiopia's ruling coalition for nearly 3 decades, found itself sidelined. A political schism grew, deepening with each passing month, culminating in a constitutional crisis when the federal government postponed national elections, citing the pandemic. Tigray defied the order, holding its own regional elections in a direct challenge to federal authority. The stage was set for a catastrophic confrontation. In November 2020, the simmering tension exploded into open conflict. What the government initially termed a law enforcement operation rapidly spiraled into a full-scale, brutal war. The conflict drew in regional militias and soldiers from neighboring Eritrea, transforming the Tigray region into a landscape of horror. For 2 years, the world witnessed a tragedy of immense proportions, much of it hidden behind a communications blackout. Reports emerged of massacres, ethnic cleansing, and the systematic use of sexual violence as a weapon of war. Entire communities were uprooted, their homes and livelihoods incinerated. The war shattered Ethiopia's carefully cultivated image as a stabilizing force in the Horn of Africa, turning it into the epicenter of one of the world's most severe and man-made humanitarian crises. Millions were pushed to the brink of famine, a haunting echo of the country's past. A peace agreement signed in Pretoria in late 2022 finally silenced the guns, but peace is more than the absence of war. The scars of this conflict are profound, etched not only on the ravaged infrastructure but on the very soul of the nation. The path to genuine reconciliation is a treacherous one. It requires more than handshakes between politicians. It demands justice for victims, the rebuilding of trust between communities, and the difficult process of accounting for the atrocities committed. For millions, the war is not over. It lives on in the trauma, in the struggle for food, and in the uncertainty of a future where the foundations of their world have been turned to dust. Beyond the overt devastation of war, other quieter costs of Ethiopia's transformation are being paid. For generations, farmers like Alemayehu have been custodians of this land. Their lives are governed by the rhythm of the seasons, their identity tied to the soil beneath their feet. The government's push for development has brought undeniable benefits: new roads that connect his village to markets, new schools for his children. But this progress is a double-edged sword. It has also brought large-scale commercial farms, vast monocultures that consume land and water at an alarming rate. These state-sponsored and foreign-backed enterprises promise to boost national food security and export revenues, but they threaten to displace smallholders like Alemayehu, severing his connection to his ancestral land and a way of life passed down through centuries. He is caught in a paradox, watching the signs of progress arrive at his doorstep, while fearing they have come to erase him. Miles away in the thriving heart of the capital, young graduates like Beetlehem inhabit a different world. For her, the city's relentless transformation is the air she breathes. The skyline, punctuated by cranes and gleaming glass towers, is a testament to ambition, a physical manifestation of the country's aspirations. This is the Ethiopia of startups, of art galleries, of a connected, globalized youth. The energy is intoxicating, fueling a powerful belief that here in this city anything is possible. She is part of the most educated generation in Ethiopian history, armed with a degree and fluent in the language of the digital age, eager to build a future for herself and her country. Yet both Alemayehu and Bethlehem are caught in the same struggle, two sides of the same coin of progress. The farmer is squeezed by the rising cost of seeds and fertilizer, his livelihood threatened by the shadow of displacement. The urban graduate, for all her optimism, is confronted by the harsh reality of a city where the cost of living is skyrocketing. Rent, food and transportation consume an ever larger portion of an income she struggles to earn. The job market is fiercely competitive, with hundreds of thousands of graduates entering each year, all vying for a limited pool of formal employment. The dream that felt so close is often tempered by the reality of underemployment and economic precarity. These are the unseen costs of development, the deep anxieties of a people navigating a period of profound and turbulent change, a nation grappling with the immense challenge of building a future that is not only prosperous but also just and inclusive for all. Ethiopia today stands at a profound crossroads, its future path shrouded in both immense promise and significant peril. The very forces that have propelled its rise also threaten to tear it apart. The most critical challenge will be to build a new political consensus based on dialogue and compromise. The unifying potential of inclusive growth is immense. When people have a genuine stake in the nation's success, the foundations of a durable peace are laid. A stable and prosperous Ethiopia holds immense significance for the entire continent. Its success would be Africa's success, lending incredible momentum to a collective African Renaissance. Will Ethiopia harness its incredible energy to build a future that is as inclusive as it is ambitious? The answer will be written in the choices made by its people. For in the highlands of East Africa, a story is unfolding that is about more than just one nation. It is about a struggle that concerns us all.